So, you want to know how those bizarre, fragile creatures from that unremarkable blue planet saved us all? Prepare yourself for disappointment, because the truth is far more ridiculous than the legends suggest. My name is Vorax Tull, Senior Archivist of the Galactic Historical Society, and I'm about to tell you the most absurd chapter in our collective history. The one they don't teach properly in education pods because, frankly, it's embarrassing how close we all came to extinction before those peculiar humans showed up. But Archivist Tull, you might ask with those four blinking eyes of yours, surely the mighty Confederation of 7,000 worlds didn't actually need help from primitive bipeds who had barely figured out faster-than-light travel. Ah, that's cute. Really adorable. The mighty Confederation was, at that point, about as mighty as a Zorbian field mouse facing a quantum harvester. We were finished. Done. Completely screwed, as the humans would say. The Void Swarm had consumed 38% of all inhabited systems in just 6 standard cycles. Our greatest military strategists had failed. Our most advanced technology proved worthless. Our bravest warriors became nothing but cosmic dust. I remember the day the High Council announced they were seeking help from outside the Confederation. The news feeds exploded with outrage. Grand Admiral Plex nearly burst a cardiovascular node during his infamous speech, "We need no assistance from primitive species. The Confederation stands alone in its glory." 2 days later, the Void Swarm devoured his entire battle fleet at Gamma Proxima, 12 billion lives gone in hours. Funny how quickly pride evaporates when faced with extinction, isn't it? That's when Director Lenza Quibb of Intelligence Division made the most controversial decision in Confederation history. She sent the call to Earth. "Why Earth?" thundered Grand Counselor Maz during the emergency session. "Those humans are barely civilized. They still use combustion engines on their own planet. They wage war against themselves. They watch entertainment about baking competitions. Director Quibb adjusted her sensory appendages calmly. "Because, esteemed counselor, humans are the only species in recorded history who have faced their own extinction event and not only survived it, but emerged stronger." "Preposterous," Maz scoffed. "What extinction event?" "They call it Monday morning staff meetings," Quibb replied with what humans would recognize as deadpan humor. Not a single council member laughed. "Tough crowd." She sighed and continued. "The plague of 2047 wiped out 40% of their population. They rebounded in less than a generation. Their climate catastrophe of the 2030s should have ended their civilization. Instead, they developed atmospheric restoration technology that they later adapted for terraforming. Their third global conflict deployed weapons that should have sterilized their planet. They survived and built a global government from the ashes." The council chamber fell silent. "Most importantly," Quibb added, "humans are the only species we have encountered who thrive on chaos. They don't just tolerate it, they embrace it, harness it, and transform it into opportunity. The Void Swarm creates chaos. Perhaps those who dance in chaos can teach us how to defeat it." Grand Counselor Maz's face tentacles curled in disgust. "So our salvation lies with savages. What a glorious end to our 70,000 years of civilization." "Well, those savages received our distress call and responded within 1 Earth week." 1 week. Most species would debate for a decade before deciding whether to answer a mysterious signal from space. The first human vessel to arrive at our headquarters on Nexus Prime was underwhelming. The HSS Intrepid looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and optimism. Its hull bore scorch marks from what we later learned was a slight disagreement with pirates near the Orion Nebula. When the airlock cycled open, the assembled dignitaries of 50 major worlds held their breath, all 4 of mine included. We expected some towering warrior race, given the stories we'd heard. Instead, outstepped Captain Talia Jackson. 5 foot 4 inches of pure audacity packed into a somewhat rumpled uniform. Behind her came the most bizarrely diverse crew I had ever seen, different sizes, colors, even different augmentation philosophies. Some were mostly biological, others heavily enhanced with cybernetics, and at least one appeared to be primarily mechanical but insisted he was human where it counts. "Sorry we are late," Captain Jackson announced, checking a primitive wrist chronometer. "We stopped to help an Arcturian freighter with engine trouble. Those modular Kessler drives are always dropping their containment fields." She grinned at the assembled galactic leadership as if she were meeting friends for a social gathering, not the desperate last hope for civilization. Grand Counselor Mass's eye stalks twitched with barely contained contempt. Captain Jackson, while we appreciate your prompt response, we expected Earth to send a military fleet. Jackson's smile never faltered. Oh, they are coming. About 300 ships, give or take, but they are organized into what we call a scattered response approach. Makes us harder to track and predict. 300 ships. Admiral Zorn gasped. The Void Swarm destroyed our 7th fleet of 12,000 vessels in under 6 hours. The human captain shrugged a peculiar gesture that rippled across her upper appendages. Quality over quantity, Admiral. Besides, we figured you have already tried to throw massive fleets at the problem approach. How's that working out? The silence that followed was so profound you could have heard a Manuvian microflea's heartbeat. Now, Jackson continued, seemingly oblivious to the diplomatic catastrophe she just ignited, we should get started right away. My tactical officer, Lieutenant Samir Patel, has some interesting theories about swarm behavior patterns that your scientists might want to hear. A lean human with alert eyes stepped forward, carrying what appeared to be actual physical documents. Paper. Like barbarians, he spread them on the grand conference table where decisions affecting trillions of lives were normally made. The Void Swarm isn't a singular entity, Patel began without preamble. It's a superorganism composed of billions of semi-autonomous units that follow simple rules, creating complex emergent behaviors. Director Quibb leaned forward. We are aware of the swarm's nature, Lieutenant. With respect, Director, I don't think you are, Patel replied, pointing to his diagrams. You have been fighting it like it's an army with a central command structure. It's not, it's more like a murmuration of starlings or a school of fish. A what? Asked Admiral Zorn. Earth animals, Jackson explained. They move in coordinated groups that appear to think as one, but are actually following simple proximity rules. No leader, no command structure. Another human stepped forward, a stocky woman with curly red hair. Dr. Rebecca Spencer, Xenobiology. The swarm's movements show fractal patterns consistent with natural systems, not military strategy. Look at these distribution graphs from the last 6 major engagements. As the meeting progressed, I observed with fascination. The humans didn't speak with the formal protocol we expected in such grave circumstances. They interrupted each other, argued openly, even made jokes. Their casual disregard for hierarchical communication should have been offensive, but instead created an environment where ideas flowed freely. Grand Counselor Maz, however, was not impressed. After 2 hours, he slammed his ceremonial staff against the floor. Enough. You bring us children's drawings and speak of Earth wildlife while worlds burn. The Confederation did not call for scientists and theories, we called for warriors and weapons. Captain Jackson's expression changed then, her smile fading into something harder. Counselor, with all due respect, you called for help. This is what help looks like. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it asks uncomfortable questions. Sometimes it means admitting your current approach isn't working. How dare you, Maz began. How dare I? What, tell the truth? Jackson stepped closer to the much taller alien. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing repeatedly and expecting different results. You have thrown fleet after fleet at the swarm for 6 years. Each time you lose. Why would doing it again work now? Director Quibb intervened before Mads could respond. What exactly are you proposing, Captain? A new approach. Instead of confronting the swarm directly, we study it, understand it, and then disrupt its organization from within. We have developed a technology we call quantum resonance disruptors that we believe can break the communication between swarm units. Admiral Zorn scoffed. We have attempted communication jamming before. This isn't jamming, said a soft voice from the back of the human delegation. A small human with pale skin and silver hair stepped forward. Dr. Jun Park, quantum physics. We don't block their communications, we introduce conflicting instructions using their own communication methods, like introducing a virus into a computer system. For 3 days, the humans presented their theories and technologies to increasingly receptive Confederation scientists and military strategists. Not everyone was convinced. Maz and his traditionalist faction remained skeptical, but desperation is a powerful motivator for open-mindedness. The first test of the human approach came sooner than expected. A Void Swarm splinter group was detected heading toward the Veridian system, home to 9 billion souls on 7 inhabited worlds. "This is perfect," Captain Jackson declared during the emergency briefing. "Small enough to be manageable, large enough to test our theories." "Perfect?" Admiral Zorn sputtered. 9 billion lives are at stake, and trillions more if we don't start fighting back effectively." Jackson countered. "We need to deploy immediately with a small, agile force." Against the protestations of Confederation military doctrine, which called for overwhelming force concentrations, Admiral Zorn reluctantly authorized a joint human Confederation task force of just 20 vessels. I wasn't supposed to be there. Archivists typically review recordings after the fact, safely distant from actual events, but Director Quibb insisted this moment required the authenticating presence of a primary historical witness. Lucky me. That's how I found myself aboard the HSS Intrepid as it led the small flotilla toward Veridian. The human vessel's interior was as baffling as its exterior, functional but chaotic, with personal items affixed to workstations, colorful images on walls, and strange aromatic beverages constantly being consumed. "Coffee," Captain Jackson explained, handing me a cup of steaming black liquid that smelled simultaneously enticing and toxic. Humanity's secret weapon. I took a cautious sip and nearly ejected my digestive sac. "This is a weapon," she laughed. "In a manner of speaking, it keeps us alert. You get used to it." The bridge atmosphere was remarkably relaxed, given our mission. Humans conversed casually, occasionally making references to their entertainment media that left me completely bewildered. Yet beneath the casual behavior I sensed an intense focus, like predators calmly assessing their prey before striking. "Approaching Veridian system," Lieutenant Patel announced. "Swarm elements detected at the edge of the heliosphere." Jackson nodded. "Deploy sensor drones. I want complete behavioral mapping before we engage." For 2 hours we observed the swarm through remote sensors. The humans huddled around displays pointing out patterns and behaviors that had escaped Confederation analysis for years. "There," Dr. Parks said eventually. "Do you see it? The synchronization pulse." On the display, visualization of energy patterns showed ripples moving through the swarm at regular intervals. "That's our target," Jackson said, turning to Admiral Zorn's holographic presence. "Admiral, we are ready to deploy the QR disruptors. Request permission to proceed." Zorn hesitated. "Captain, our projections indicate the swarm will reach Veridian 4th in 6 hours. Shouldn't we engage directly now? And achieve what? The same result as every other direct engagement?" Jackson shook her head. "Trust us, Admiral, this will work." After a painful pause, Zorn nodded. "Proceed, Captain. The Confederation places its faith in your unconventional approach." Jackson turned to her crew. "Deploy disruptors, maximum dispersion pattern." Small, drone-like devices launched from the Intrepid and its companion vessels, speeding toward the swarm but stopping well short of engagement range. "Now we wait," Dr. Parks said softly. "I'm not sure what I expected, perhaps some dramatic explosion or visible effect." Instead, nothing seemed to happen for nearly 30 minutes. The swarm continued its inexorable advance toward the populated worlds. Grand Counselor Maz's hologram appeared, his face tentacles writhing with anger. "This is your solution? To watch as the swarm approaches our worlds?" "Patience, Counselor," Jackson replied without taking her eyes off the tactical display. "Look at Sector 7. At the edges of the swarm, a subtle change was occurring. Small groups of swarm units began moving erratically, breaking formation." "It's working," Dr. Spencer whispered. "The disruption is propagating through their communication network." Over the next hour, the cohesion of the swarm deteriorated further. Groups began moving in contradictory directions, some even attacking other swarm elements as their behavioral programming became confused. "Now," Jackson ordered. Conventional forces engaged the isolated segments. The Confederation vessels, which had been hanging back, now moved forward, targeting the disorganized swarm elements with devastating efficiency. Without their unified defense patterns, the once invincible enemy fell quickly. 3 hours later, the Veridian system was secure. Not a single swarm unit had reached the inhabited planets. The human approach had worked with minimal casualties and resource expenditure. The celebration aboard the Intrepid was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. Humans embraced each other, consumed intoxicating substances, and played music at volumes that threatened my auditory organs. They invited the Confederation crews to join them, breaking down centuries of protocol and formality in minutes. I found Captain Jackson alone on the observation deck, staring out at the stars, a glass of amber liquid in her hand. "You saved billions of lives today," I said, attempting to express appropriate gratitude. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Today, yes. But this was just one system, one splinter of the swarm. The real fight is just beginning. But you have proven your approach works. The Confederation will surely commit all necessary resources now." Jackson sipped her drink. "I hope so, Archivist Tull, but changing minds can be harder than defeating enemies. Your people have been fighting one way for a long time. Old habits die hard." She was right, of course. Despite the victory at Veridian, the Confederation military establishment resisted full adoption of human tactics. Admiral Zorn supported the new approach, but Maz and his faction argued it was a fluke, a one-time success that couldn't be replicated at scale. Then came the Battle of Nexus Prime, the Confederation's most important world, seat of government and culture. The Void Swarm arrived in force, not a splinter but a full invasion thrust comprising millions of units. The human fleet, now fully arrived and integrated with Confederation forces, faced its greatest test. This would determine whether humanity's approach would be embraced or discarded, whether the galaxy would survive or fall. Our vessels deployed in what the humans called a Swiss cheese formation, deliberate gaps and weaknesses that looked like tactical errors but were actually carefully designed to manipulate swarm behavior. "They are taking the bait," Lieutenant Patel announced as swarm elements moved to exploit the apparent vulnerabilities. Captain Jackson nodded. "Just like fish chasing a lure. Deploy Phase 2 disruptors." The battle that followed would reshape Confederation military doctrine forever. Human vessels executed maneuvers that seemed suicidal, diving into swarm concentrations only to emerge unscathed after deploying their disruptors at the heart of enemy formations. The Intrepid itself took a leading role, with Jackson ordering course changes that made even veteran human crew members exchange nervous glances. They corkscrewed through swarm formations, dancing between enemy units with a precision that seemed impossible. "How are they doing this?" Admiral Zorn demanded as he watched from the command center. Director Queeb, standing beside him, answered quietly, "They are improvising, Admiral. Each captain has the strategic objective, but is free to execute as they see fit based on changing conditions. No central micromanagement. That's chaos," Zorn whispered. "Exactly," Quib replied. "Fighting chaos with chaos." As the battle reached its climax, the swarm's behavior became increasingly erratic. Large sections turned against each other, while others retreated in disarray. The combined human Confederation forces pressed their advantage, systematically dismantling the enemy formation. Hours later, it was over. Nexus Prime was saved. The greatest Void Swarm assault ever recorded had been defeated with casualties at a fraction of previous engagements. In the aftermath, even Grand Counselor Maz couldn't deny the effectiveness of the human approach. The council chamber, which had greeted the humans with skepticism weeks earlier, now erupted in applause as Captain Jackson and her crew entered. "The Confederation acknowledges its debt to humanity," Maz announced formally. "Your tactics and technology have given us hope where none existed before." Jackson stepped forward. "Counselor, with respect, it wasn't just our tactics or technology that made the difference, it was our perspective. Where you saw only threat, we saw patterns. Where you sought to overwhelm with force, we looked for leverage points. Sometimes the greatest problems don't need the greatest firepower, they need fresh eyes." Director Quib smiled slightly. "And what do those fresh eyes suggest for our next steps, Captain?" "The swarm has been driven from Confederation space for now, but it will return." "They always do," Jackson agreed, "which is why we need to take the fight to them, find their point of origin, end this permanently." Admiral Zorn leaned forward. "We have never been able to track the swarm to its source. They seem to emerge from empty space." "Nothing emerges from empty space, Admiral," Dr. Park interjected. "Our analysis suggests they are utilizing some form of dimensional folding to travel between our space and somewhere else." "Another dimension?" Maz scoffed. "Preposterous," says the tentacled alien to the human, Jackson muttered, earning a sharp look from Quib and a barely suppressed laugh from Zorn. Jackson cleared her throat. We believe we can modify our quantum resonance technology to detect the dimensional signatures left by their transits. If we can identify a pattern, we can find their point of origin. And then what? Maz demanded. Follow them into another dimension? That's suicide. Captain Jackson's smile returned that unsettling expression that suggested she knew something you didn't. Counselor, where I come from, we have a saying, fortune favors the bold. The swarm has been hunting you for years. Perhaps it's time they learned what it feels like to be hunted. The council chamber erupted in debate. Even those who had accepted human tactics for defensive operations balked at the idea of launching an offensive into unknown dimensional space. As the arguments raged, I found myself standing beside Dr. Spencer at a refreshment station. Will your plan really work? I asked quietly. She considered the question while selecting a peculiar earth fruit. Honestly, we don't know. But that's the difference between our species, Archivist Tull. You need certainty before acting. We are comfortable proceeding on faith and improvising as we go. That seems reckless. Sometimes it is, she admitted. We have made terrible mistakes throughout our history. But we have also achieved the impossible precisely because we were willing to try when success seemed unlikely. She bit into her fruit. Besides, what's the alternative? Wait for the swarm to regroup and attack again? How's that working out for you? I had no answer for that. The next day, the council narrowly approved Captain Jackson's plan. A joint expedition would venture beyond Confederation space, tracking swarm dimensional signatures in hopes of finding their origin point. The HSS Intrepid would lead the mission, accompanied by 3 Confederation vessels and 2 additional human ships. I requested and surprisingly received permission to accompany them as the official historical witness. As we prepared to depart Nexus Prime, Captain Jackson found me in the Intrepid's observation lounge, recording my impressions of recent events. Having second thoughts, Archivist? She asked, noticing my agitated tentacle movements. No, I lied. Just ensuring my records are complete before we proceed into the unknown. She laughed. You know what humans call what we are about to do? What? Tuesday. She grinned at my confusion. It means it's just another day for us. The unknown is our natural habitat, Tull. You might want to get comfortable with it. As our small fleet departed, I gazed back at the glittering expanse of Confederation space. 70,000 years of civilization, trillions of lives, countless achievements, all now dependent on these unpredictable, reckless, brilliant humans and their willingness to leap into darkness. We were indeed the last hope of the galaxy, and somehow, against all reason and probability, I believed we would deliver. But the true test still awaited us beyond the edges of charted space, where the void swarm lurked in dimensions unknown. Whatever we would find there would change the galaxy forever, assuming we survived to tell the tale. And that, my friends, is where our real adventure began. Interdimensional space, as it turns out, is even less pleasant than it sounds. Our small fleet had been tracking void swarm dimensional signatures for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of nauseating reality fluctuations, equipment malfunctions, and increasingly tense nerves. The humans called the strange region we traversed the blur, an apt description for space where light behaved oddly and sensor readings contradicted each other hourly. How are you holding up, Archivist? Captain Jackson asked, finding me clutching a support beam during yet another reality tremor. Perfectly adequate, I lied, all 4 of my eyes struggling to focus, though I confess these dimensional anomalies are challenging for my species' neurological system. She smiled sympathetically. The human term is seasick, though that doesn't quite cover dimensional nausea. Dr. Prisha has some meds that might help. I'd already sampled the human physician's concoctions. They left me feeling simultaneously better and worse. The nausea subsided, but everything took on a purple hue and I developed an inexplicable craving for dairy products. My species is lactose toxic. The Confederation vessels in our expedition were faring even worse. The HFY Valorous, a dreadnought that had survived 17 major engagements, lost artificial gravity 6 times in 2 days. The HFY Inevitable reported crew experiencing temporal disorientation, with some perceiving minutes where others experienced hours. Only the human ships seemed to adapt, not without difficulty, but with remarkable resilience. Your vessels appear less affected by these dimensional distortions, I noted to Lieutenant Patel during a particularly stable moment. He glanced up from his endless calculations. Our ships were designed with more adaptive systems, less rigid programming, more neural response architecture. They adjust better to changing physical constants. That's impressively prescient, given you couldn't have anticipated these conditions. Tull laughed. Oh, we didn't. Our ships were designed this way because humans can't agree on anything, including engineering standards. Different teams built different systems, and rather than standardize everything, we created interfaces that could handle variations. Happy accident that it works here too. That seemed to be the recurring theme with humans. Their greatest strengths emerged from what the Confederation would consider flaws: disorganization, excessive individualism, and a bewildering tolerance for chaos. On day 23, everything changed. Contact, shouted Ensign Orla Duffy, the Intrepid's sensor specialist. Her normally cheerful face had gone pale. Massive readings ahead. Definitely swarm signatures, but different. Captain Jackson strode to her station.
Different how?
More organized, denser. It's like Duffy's hands danced across her console. Every swarm we have encountered before was just a fragment. This is the whole. The main view screen adjusted to show what lay ahead. Even my limited human color perception registered the vast darkness punctuated by pulsing, sickly light. The mass stretched beyond sensor range in all directions. Well, Jackson said after a long pause, I think we found their home. Admiral Zorn's hologram appeared, his dignified features twisted with concern. Captain, this is beyond anything we anticipated. We should retreat and report our findings. Jackson didn't immediately answer. She was studying the readings with an intensity I'd come to recognize, the look of a predator assessing prey, calculating odds. With respect, Admiral, if we leave now, we lose our one advantage. Surprise. They don't know we are here yet. Once we break dimensional transit back to normal space, they will detect the energy signature. You can't possibly suggest engaging that monstrosity. Zorn gestured at the view screen. Dr. Park stepped forward. Admiral, we are detecting something unusual at coordinates 27 Mark 43. It appears to be a central node, significantly larger than the surrounding swarm units. A brain? Jackson asked. More like a queen in a hive, Dr. Spencer suggested. Or a server in a distributed network. Something that coordinates the whole. Jackson's expression shifted to something I'd never seen before. A smile. Yes, but one that sent chills down all three of my spinal columns. Admiral, she said, I believe we just found their off switch. What followed was the most heated strategic debate I have ever witnessed. The Confederation officers argued for immediate withdrawal. The humans pushed for a precision strike against the central node. Neither side was willing to yield. This is suicide, Commander Vex of the ZCS Inevitable shouted. Even if this node is what you claim, we can't possibly reach it through that concentration of swarm units. We don't need to reach it directly, Lieutenant Patel countered. We just need to get close enough to deploy an enhanced quantum resonance disruptor. And how do you propose to do that? Vex demanded. Captain Jackson, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. We send a single ship, small, fast, running silent. The room fell silent. The Intrepid, she continued. We can modify our engines to match swarm dimensional harmonics. They might not even register us as a separate entity if we tune it right. And the rest of the fleet? Admiral Zorn asked. Positions themselves here. Jackson pointed to a region of relatively empty space, ready to extract us or provide distraction if needed. Us, I blurted out. You intend to go yourself? Jackson's eyes met mine. This is a volunteer mission only, Archivist. Anyone who wants to stay with the fleet can transfer. I'd like to report that I immediately volunteered to continue my historical documentation duties. The truth is considerably less heroic. I froze, caught between academic obligation and basic survival instinct. While I was having my internal crisis, Dr. Park raised a hand. The disruptor modifications will require my expertise. Me too, added Dr. Spencer. You will need xenobiological monitoring to track swarm reactions. One by one, the Intrepid's core crew volunteered. No grand speeches, no dramatic declarations, just quiet determination. Well, Archivist, Jackson asked finally, history or safety? I wish I could say my decision was based on noble commitment to knowledge. In reality, I was more terrified of looking like a coward in front of these humans than I was of the Void Swarm. Pride. The downfall of so many sentient beings. I will accompany the mission, I managed to say. For posterity. Jackson's smile was almost kind. For posterity. The preparations moved with alarming speed. The Intrepid's engines were recalibrated while the quantum resonance disruptor was enhanced to unprecedented power levels. The ship's non-essential personnel transferred to other vessels, leaving a skeleton crew of 30 humans and one very anxious Confederation archivist. 6 hours later, we separated from the fleet and began our approach toward the heart of the swarm. Dimensional camouflage active, Lieutenant Patel reported. Engine harmonics matched to swarm patterns. All emissions at minimum. Added Ensign Duffy, we are running as quiet as a library mouse. The tension on the bridge was palpable as we glided into the outer reaches of the swarm. If our calculations were wrong, if the camouflage failed, we would be obliterated instantly. Nothing happened. The swarm units continued their hypnotic movements, seemingly oblivious to our presence. It's working, Dr. Park whispered. They perceive us as part of themselves. Captain Jackson nodded but remained focused on the navigation display. Let's not celebrate yet. We are still 20 minutes from optimal deployment range. Those 20 minutes stretched into what felt like eternity. I found myself holding breath. I didn't realize I was holding, releasing it only when my peripheral vision began to darken. Captain, Ensign Duffy's voice broke the silence. Something's changing. The swarm units ahead are realigning. Have we been detected? Jackson demanded. I don't think so. Duffy frowned. The pattern isn't defensive. It's more like they are creating a pathway. On the view screen, the unthinkable became visible. The endless mass of swarm units was indeed parting, forming a corridor that led directly toward the central node. They are inviting us in, Dr. Spencer said in disbelief. Or it's a trap, Lieutenant Patel countered. Captain Jackson's face remained impassive. Only one way to find out. Maintain course. The Intrepid continued forward, now traveling down an eerie corridor flanked by millions of dormant swarm units. The central node grew larger on our screens, a pulsating structure the size of a small moon, radiating patterns of light that made my visual centers ache. Optimal deployment range in 3 minutes, Patel announced. Disruptor ready, Dr. Park confirmed. Jackson nodded. Good. Prepare. She never finished the sentence. A blinding flash of energy enveloped the bridge, and for a moment I thought we'd been destroyed. Instead, when my vision cleared, I saw a figure standing in the center of the command deck. No, not standing. Floating. And not exactly a figure, more a suggestion of one, a humanoid shape composed of shifting light and darkness. Visitors, it said, though not with sound. The word appeared directly in my consciousness, bypassing my auditory organs. Captain Jackson, recovering faster than anyone, stepped forward. I am Captain Talia Jackson of the human spaceship Intrepid. Who are you? We are the Directorate. We are the Swarm. Every crew member exchanged glances of confusion and alarm. This wasn't just unexpected, it was paradigm-shattering. The Void Swarm was supposed to be a mindless force of destruction, not a sentient entity with representatives. Why have you been attacking worlds in Confederation space? Jackson asked, her voice remarkably steady. The luminous figure tilted what might have been its head. Attacking? No. Harvesting. Collecting. Preserving. Preserving? Dr. Spencer stepped forward. You have destroyed billions of lives. Incorrect. No destruction. Transformation. Incorporation. All preserved within the collective. A terrible understanding began to dawn on me. The people you have taken, they are still alive? Alive. Yes. Different. Better. Part of the whole. Captain Jackson's expression hardened. You have been absorbing entire civilizations against their will. That's not preservation, that's consumption. Will is irrelevant. Existence continues. Individuality is inefficient. The collapse comes. What collapse? Dr. Park asked. The figure's form rippled. Dimensional decay. All universes end. We preserve what can be saved before the void consumes all. For a moment, no one spoke. The concept was too vast, too horrifying to immediately process. The swarm believed it was saving the galaxy by assimilating its inhabitants before some greater catastrophe. Captain Jackson recovered first. Even if what you are saying is true, you don't have the right to force this transformation on others. Sentient beings deserve the choice of how to face their end. Choice leads to waste, inefficiency, loss. Choice is what makes us who we are, Jackson countered. Without it, you are not preserving us. You are just preserving our component parts. The figure seemed to consider this. Humans, different. Your minds function unusually chaotic, but patterned. Explain. Dr. Spencer stepped forward. We embrace contradiction. We contain multitudes. Our chaotic nature is our strength. It allows us to adapt, to find solutions where rigid thinking cannot. Inefficient, the entity repeated, but with what almost seemed like uncertainty. Maybe, Jackson admitted, but beautiful in its way and effective. We found you, after all, when the Confederation couldn't. The figure pulsed with changing light. Yes, unexpected. Interesting. I have a proposal, Jackson said. Work with us, not against us. If this dimensional collapse is real, let us face it together, as allies. Share your knowledge. We will share ours. Together we might find a solution that doesn't require the loss of individual consciousness. Pointless. The collapse cannot be prevented. Maybe not, Dr. Park interjected. But humanity specializes in the impossible. Our entire history is doing what couldn't be done, and we do our best work under pressure. The entity's form flickered rapidly, patterns shifting in what I later learned was its version of deep computation, probability of success, minimal, but not zero, Jackson pressed. And a small chance of full success is better than the certainty of partial preservation, isn't it? Especially when that preservation destroys what makes each species unique. For what seemed like an eternity, the entity remained silent. Then, proposal, accepted, conditional, temporary. One planetary cycle to demonstrate alternative solution. Agreed, Jackson said without hesitation, but you must withdraw all swarm units from Confederation space immediately, as a show of good faith. Acceptable. Dimensional coordinates for diplomatic exchange will follow. With another flash, the entity vanished, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Did we just negotiate peace with the Void Swarm? Lieutenant Patel finally asked. Tentative peace, Jackson corrected. We have 1 year to prove we can find an alternative solution to this dimensional collapse they are worried about. Do you think it's real? I asked. This collapse? Dr. Park nodded slowly. It aligns with some theoretical models of multidimensional space. Given enough time, dimensional barriers can degrade, causing universal entropy acceleration. So the fate of the galaxy now depends on us solving multidimensional physics in a year. Ensign Duffy looked pale. The fate of the galaxy, Captain Jackson said with a hint of her usual smile, depends on us doing what humans do best, finding a third option when presented with two bad choices. The return journey to Confederation space was surreal. The swarm units parted before us like ceremonial guards, and when we rejoined the fleet, Admiral Zorn's face showed equal parts relief and disbelief as we explained what had transpired. You expect the Council to believe this? He asked when Jackson finished her report. They don't have to believe it, she replied. They just have to observe. If I'm right, all swarm activity in Confederation space should cease within days. She was right. Within a week, every Void Swarm unit had withdrawn from Confederation territory. Worlds that had been bracing for invasion found themselves inexplicably safe. The galaxy held its collective breath, waiting for the other gravitational boot to drop. It didn't. The swarm honored its agreement. The reception at Nexus Prime was considerably different this time. No skepticism, no condescension, just awe and gratitude from species who had been facing extinction only weeks before. Even Grand Counselor Maz seemed humbled. The Confederation acknowledges an unprecedented debt to humanity, he declared in full council session. You have achieved through dialogue what our fleets could not achieve through force. Captain Jackson accepted the praise graciously, but I noted the concern behind her eyes. Counselor, while we appreciate the recognition, our work is just beginning. We have one planetary cycle to develop a solution to the dimensional collapse the Directorate fears. And if this collapse is merely a delusion on their part, Maz asked, then we have still bought peace through understanding, Jackson replied. But our scientists don't believe it's a delusion. The mathematics check out. What followed was the most remarkable scientific collaboration in galactic history. Human theoretical physicists worked alongside Confederation dimensional specialists. The Directorate shared its accumulated knowledge from thousands of absorbed civilizations. Even species that had historically been rivals united in the face of cosmic extinction. I wish I could explain the solution they eventually developed. The physics are beyond my comprehension, involving concepts that lack proper translation into any standard language. The humans called it dimensional reinforcement lattice technology, a network of devices placed at strategic points throughout the galaxy that would strengthen the barriers between dimensions, preventing collapse. The construction effort was monumental, requiring resources from every major world and technical expertise from dozens of species. The humans led the effort not through authority but through inspiration, their relentless optimism somehow infectious even to species that had evolved without the concept. 11 months after the Intrepid's encounter with the Directorate, the network was activated. For a breathless moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then sensor readings across the galaxy confirmed success. Dimensional stability increased by 47% immediately, with projections showing continued improvement. When representatives of the Directorate arrived at Nexus Prime to verify the results, even their usually expressionless energy forms seemed impressed. Unexpected success, the primary entity acknowledged. Probability calculations were incorrect. That's us in a nutshell, Captain Jackson replied with a grin. Beating the odds is practically our species' hobby. Your solution preserves individuality while ensuring collective survival. Inefficient but acceptable. The formal peace treaty that followed included not just cessation of hostilities, but active cooperation. The beings that had composed the swarm began to share their accumulated knowledge with the galaxy. Those civilizations that had been partially harvested received technology to potentially restore individuals who had been absorbed. The galaxy entered an unprecedented era of peace and advancement. Species that had been on the brink of extinction now flourished. The dimensional reinforcement network became the physical embodiment of galactic cooperation, maintained by all for the benefit of all. And the humans, they did what humans always do, grew restless, and looked to the horizon. "You are leaving?" I asked Captain Jackson when she informed me of the Intrepid's upcoming departure. She nodded, gazing out at the stars from Nexus Prime's observation deck. "New mission. There are galaxies beyond this one, Tolu, who knows what they might need help with. But you have earned the right to rest, to be celebrated." She laughed. "Humans aren't built for rest. Not for long, anyway. We need challenges, frontiers. Besides, the Confederation has absorbed enough human chaos theory for now. You need time to process before we introduce more." I couldn't argue with that. In just one standard year, humanity had revolutionized Confederation military tactics, diplomatic approaches, scientific methodology, and even cultural norms. Our society would be digesting these changes for generations. The day the human fleet departed was declared a galactic holiday. Ships from every major world formed an honor guard extending from Nexus Prime to the dimensional transit point. Captain Jackson, characteristically uncomfortable with ceremony, made the shortest acceptance speech in Confederation history. "We came because you needed help. We stayed because it was the right thing to do. We are leaving because there's always more right things waiting to be done. Call if you need us. We will answer." As the Intrepid led the human fleet into the dimensional corridor, Grand Counselor Maz stood beside me on the review platform. "Remarkable species," he said quietly, his face tentacles waving gently in what I recognized as profound respect. "Indeed," I agreed, though I'm not sure the galaxy could have handled more than one human-level crisis at a time. Maz made the whistling sound that served as his species' version of laughter. "Perhaps that's why they evolved so far from the rest of us. The universe has a sense of self-preservation after all." I have often pondered that observation in the years since. Perhaps the humans were the galaxy's immune response, chaotic, unpredictable, sometimes damaging in their enthusiasm, but ultimately necessary for survival. The Void Swarm crisis entered the historical records as the dimensional preservation era. Statues of Captain Jackson and her crew stand in the grand concourse of Nexus Prime. Confederation battle doctrine now includes entire sections on constructive chaos theory and adaptive response protocols. But the true legacy of humanity's intervention isn't found in monuments or textbooks. It's in the philosophical shift that rippled through thousands of worlds. Species that had valued order above all else began to recognize the power of controlled chaos. Civilizations that had stagnated found new vigor in embracing uncertainty. As for me, I did something unprecedented. For a senior archivist, I requested field assignment to the Galactic Rim, where rumors suggested new human colonies were being established. My colleagues were scandalized. Senior archivists did not leave their climate-controlled repositories to mingle with frontier settlements. Why? The chief archivist demanded when I submitted my request. I thought about Captain Jackson's parting words and found myself smiling in that unsettling human way. Because history isn't made in archives, I replied. It's made by those reckless enough to venture into the unknown, and I'd like to see what happens next. The human expression for what I felt as I boarded the transport to the Rim colonies is catching the bug. It's an apt metaphor. Their chaos is infectious, their curiosity contagious. Their relentless optimism in the face of cosmic indifference somehow inspires even the most cynical species to hope. We were indeed the last hope of the galaxy, and we delivered. Not because humans saved us, but because they taught us to save ourselves. Though I'd never admit this to Captain Jackson, humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization wasn't their technology or tactics. It was the simple, radical idea that the universe isn't something that happens to you, it's something you happen to. And for a species that spent most of its evolutionary history as prey rather than predator, that's a perspective worth spreading across the stars.